What's up, guys? I know it's been a while since the last upload. I'll get into why in a subsequent video. But when it comes to the topic of today, which is Steven Crowder versus the Daily Wire, you might be thinking, why are you covering this? This is a topic that many people have already done. It's old news. It's about a month ago. Why are we talking about it now? Well, I have some fairly proprietary information that I'd like to cover in this video that I haven't seen anybody else cover. So stick around, you might find it interesting. But for people who don't know, here's the basic breakdown of what we're discussing today. So you have Steven Crowder and the Daily Wire. So if you had to describe Steven Crowder, you'd probably say he's the single most successful standalone conservative commentator, YouTuber that's out there. Just looking at his channel, you see he's got about 6 million subscribers, and his videos regularly get hundreds of thousands of views, if not millions of views at times. And his live show regularly gets hundreds of thousands of views. Daily Wire, on the other hand, is arguably one of the most successful startup conservative networks in the country. As you can see in this Forbes article from April 9th, 2022, where it says Daily Wire by the numbers. They talk about Daily Wire having a run rate approaching $150 million annualized, closing in on 200 full-time employees, and having a paid subscriber base of 600,000. Now, this is, of course, before their documentary, What is a Woman by Matt Walsh, which gained them a ton of notoriety and new subscribers. And in fact, on November 17th, Daily Wire did a stream announcing that they had hit over 1 million paid subscribers.
And this month, for the first time ever, Daily Wire Plus can announce that we have 1 million active subscribers.
So since that Forbes article, they've nearly doubled their subscriber base. It's probably safe to assume they've passed the $200 million annual mark. Perhaps they're in the neighborhood of approaching 300 million. Any way you slice it, very successful and a behemoth in the industry. Now, Steven Crowder, throughout almost his entire career, has worked with various networks, whether it's Fox, PJTV back in the day, CRTV, then going into the Blaze TV. And not that long ago, his Blaze contract expired. And Steven Crowder, like he did for much of his career, was looking for another network to join. So he sends his agent out to see what kind of offers are out there, and he gets a term sheet back from a particular company. And the terms in this contract really bothered Steven Crowder. So on January 17th, 2023, Steven Crowder puts out the video, "It's time to stop." And in this video, he goes through aspects of the term sheet that he believes are unfair. These are terms that Steven Crowder finds unfair because he believes they put conservative content creators under the thumb of big tech.
Do not sign something that includes, let me go through this. Effectively, full ownership of all your social media platforms, channels, in perpetuity, the rights to your content name, image, likeness, even the ones that you've built.
So here's the issue. Crowder is already being dishonest with his audience. Now, is this intentional? Is this malicious? Or is it just a misunderstanding? I'll let you be the judge of that. But he talks about all your social media accounts, even the ones that you've built, in perpetuity. That's not what the contract says. If we look at the contract, where it talks about social media management, we'll have the exclusive right to manage, curate, and monetize Crowder's official Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Snapchat, Rumble, and other social media accounts, excluding Crowder's existing personal Twitter and Instagram accounts. So he gets to keep full control of his Twitter and Instagram accounts, personal ones, not the Louder with Crowder one or whatever, during the term. So that's the key language there, during the term. So his official Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., all those things we just read, they only manage, curate, and monetize that during the term of the contract. Now, where this perpetual part comes in is where it talks about the exclusive right to create, own, manage, curate, and monetize any and all social media accounts on any social media or similar platform as determined by blah, 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 blah. That's talking about the content that they create, that they produce. That's talking about the new content that they do. For example, if they do a documentary like What is a Woman, etc., featuring Crowder or whatever, and this is done during the term of the contract, they're basically paying the fees to produce this, etc. They maintain the rights to that. That's theirs. That's pretty standard. So some things that they own in perpetuity, the new content that they help create, but everything that he's already created and already built, those are still his, just not for the term of the contract. Once that term is up, they're all his again. And of course, none of this affects his personal Twitter and Instagram accounts. So he goes on to explain more aspects of the contract.
Contracts out there that include multi-million-dollar penalties for different... Let me read you an example of what I mean. And this would be if it was me. If Crowder fails to deliver a monthly content, in any month or any of the quarterly content in the corner, including any and all ad reads, and by the way, all these contracts came with 3, 4, 5 ad reads per show, which would fundamentally change what this show is. Got to get those dollar bills. If I fail to do that, it would be a $250,000 reduction in fee per quarter. If, let's say, we did do everything per quarter, but annually maybe miss something, like let's say we went and did a Change My Mind instead of a daily show, which of course requires a lot more work, there'd be a separate $1 million penalty for that if you miss a single piece of content. And the amount of content required is not in line with, frankly, it's worse than Disney, it's worse than ABC, it's worse than NBC, it's worse than CBS. This is ownership of you and everything that you do. But here's, just to drive it home, don't sign something that has another $100,000 daily penalty if it's not signed off on beforehand. You get hit by a car, you have a sick day, you could lose $100,000 a day.
Now that's pretty bad. You see those numbers, $100,000, $250,000, $1 million as a penalty. These numbers to a typical person, those seem like very hefty fines, unfair fines. And he says, hey, if you get hit by a car for reasons that are outside of your control and you can't do the show, well, you lose $100,000 per episode. But this is yet another case where Crowder's either being dishonest or doesn't understand the term sheet. Because in the very same document that he shows here, we can see Section E, disability. In the event of temporary disability or serious illness that prevents Crowder from performing, the fee will be reduced on a pro rata basis, not subject to the fee reduction schedule above. So pro rata would mean instead of getting subjected to the penalty of $100,000, for example, you would take the 192 episodes that you are contracted to do, you would take the fee that is being paid to the content creator, in this case, Crowder, and you would basically divide, and if you missed one show, two shows, whatever, then you just remove that out. And here's another thing. In addition to his 4 weeks off, him only having to do 192 episodes in a calendar year that has 365 days, having to work only 4 days a week, and the disability stipulation where it's pro rata instead of the actual $100,000 penalty or whatever it is, we have this stipulation in the contract.
Crowder can bank or pre-record a limited number of episodes. Upon our approval and reasonable discretion, days without new original episodes will be scheduled in advance, subject to our reasonable approval.
But you might be noticing a bit of a problem here right now, because in the video that Crowder put out, he never showed how much he was getting paid in this term sheet. He's showing you these big numbers of fines, like $100,000, $250,000, $1 million, but he's not showing the number that corresponds to that, which is the fee that he is being paid by the company that he's getting this term sheet from. And just for time's sake, without playing the video, I want to go over this section as well. Crowder highlights this section, which talks about ad drops, content strikes, and bans. So if he loses more than 50% of the advertising partners and the company is not able to replace them within 90 days, then the fee by which Crowder is paid will be reduced by 25% until such time that ad revenue has been restored for a period of 90 days. A content strike, if any of the major platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, issue a content strike other than a company-wide content strike, such that Crowder content cannot be monetized on such platform and the company is not able to resolve the issue within 90 days, then the fee will be reduced by 25% from that point forward. And then, of course, a ban. If the Crowder content cannot be released on any of the major platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, because of Crowder or his content being banned from those platforms, then the fee will be reduced by, if YouTube, 20%, if Apple Podcasts, 20%, if Facebook, 10%, if Spotify, 10%. So these terms were the ones that Crowder seemed to have the biggest problem with. Basically saying, if you're penalizing us because YouTube or Apple or other big tech platforms have determined our content should be struck or we should be banned, deplatformed, etc., you are then siding with big tech. The problem with this is that Crowder's value almost comes entirely from his existence on big tech in the first place. Crowder has nearly 6 million subscribers on which platform? YouTube. Were it not for his subscriber base on YouTube, that giant audience, the platform where he's most known, then Crowder's value would not be the value that it is now. Currently, as Crowder is independent, he's basically 100% at the whim of big tech right now. By partnering up with a media company, which is presumably why his agent reached out in the first place, and presumably why he's been involved with these networks throughout his career, is because it offers him some level of job security. Because having 100% of the risk on you as the content creator can be very stressful. It can be very make or break. But if you split the risk with a network, whether it was The Blaze or CRTV in the past or PJTV and now the Daily Wire in this term sheet that didn't go to plan. By splitting the risk, That takes a load off your shoulders. Now you're not 100% at the risk of big tech. You and a big network partner are now at the whim of big tech. Now, we only got to see the parts of the term sheet that Crowder wanted to show his audience. And while he didn't name the company involved, people quickly figured out by the amount of space that was allotted and based on the amount of money that was involved in this deal, presumably, that there were really only a few viable options as far as who this network could be. And people quickly figured out that it was the Daily Wire. So the next day, January 18th, the video is titled, "Our Offer to Steven Crowder." Now, the video is nearly an hour long. If you're interested in this drama, I highly recommend watching it. Jeremy Boring goes through the entire term sheet, and he explains section by section what they mean and their reasoning behind all that they put into this term sheet. For example, he goes over the section Crowder was pretty angry about, which was the monetization part with the content strike. And Jeremy Boring, the CEO of Daily Wire, goes over that section, explaining it like this.
Same with the content strike. If any major platform, YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcast, Spotify, issues a content strike such that Crowder's content cannot be monetized on the platform, then again, there's this 90-day concept, and again, there's this 25% reduction. Now, Steven, when I spoke to him, he was very upset. He said, I've already been demonetized on YouTube. That's the kind of thing in a negotiation. You scratch through that with your red pen and you say, Steven's already been demonetized from YouTube, so we can't start the deal at minus 25. You have to already have anticipated that. And that would have been fine. That's just a very common. But if he were making a significant portion of his revenue on YouTube and he lost that revenue, it's not punishing him to say you will make less. We're all going to make less. The real punishment would be if we took all the hit, continue to pay him guaranteed money, whether his show makes money or not, and then we lose the business as a result. And now no one pays Steven anything, and no one releases Steven's content. He has to go build it all from scratch in crisis.
And to add to this particular point, you have Candace Owens, who talked about this same clause in her contract, which she had struck from it.
He's pretending that there was something nefarious going on there. I got the same stuff that made no sense. You'd say, just like he said, this makes no sense because I'm already demonetized from YouTube. That was my circumstance for Facebook. They had a thing about demonetization from Facebook. My lawyer went back and said, Candace is already demonetized on Facebook. And they went, oh, that's right. Strike it from the clause.
And again, this is a term sheet. This is not a contract. This is a starting point. You're supposed to negotiate these things. But to get a better sense of what the actual numbers were when it comes to how much Crowder was going to be compensated in this initial term sheet, let's take a look at the Jeremy Boring explanation video about the contract.
And for those of you who've never been through a contract negotiation, well, that's how it works. When you send someone an offer, you don't send them everything that you're willing to say yes to, because there is going to be a negotiation, because agents and lawyers are going to get involved, because you can't read their mind. You don't know everything that will be important to them and everything that they'll want. You don't know even some of their sort of non-negotiable points. And so you send over a loose offer, and then they're going to beat it up a little bit. They're going to say, well, this should be higher and this should be lower. And you're going to come back and say, no, we're going to stand firm here, but we're willing to compromise there. And over time, you either get to a deal or you don't get to a deal. But that's how a good faith negotiation always works. 100% of every interaction I've ever had with any talent, that's the process. And so here we go. Here was our offer. A 4-year initial term with 2-year renewal at DW's sole discretion. That just means Steven's going to work for DW for 4 years. And if it's going really well, DW can retain him for an additional 2 years. 2, the fee. And remember, this is the minimum number that we thought would get the conversation started with Steven. $50 million for the initial term, plus $25 million for the renewal term, if extended, paid in monthly installments.
So there you have it, a 4-year term at $50 million and another additional option to extend for 2 years at $25 million. So that's about $12.5 million per year. Granted, all the production costs and everything are handled by Steven Crowder, whereas Daily Wire would handle marketing and promotion and all that stuff. And like Jeremy said, this is a negotiation process for a contract. This is an initial term sheet. Negotiations are expected. I believe in Candace Owens' case, it took about 5 months of back and forth between her team and Daily Wire's team before they came to a final agreement. So these things take time. And just so this section doesn't take longer than it has to, Jeremy basically says Crowder's team came back negotiating for $120 million instead of the $50 million for the 4-year term. So more than doubling the number. Instead of $12.5 million per year, they wanted to make it $30 million per year. They apparently made no effort to redline things out of the contract, like the clauses that Steven Crowder was so concerned about. But by the end of Jeremy Boring's video, he had very nice things to say about Crowder, praised his talent, etc., told people to actually even go support him and subscribe to him, etc. But then the next day, January 19th, Steven Crowder decides to reveal his hand, that he had recorded a conversation with Jeremy Boring where this is the big bombshell.
They don't get deals that...
They can be wage slaves for a little bit, come over and make a salary and grow their brand. They can be wage slaves for a little bit. They can be wage slaves for a little bit.
God bless the Talkboy. Those things are worth like $5,000 now. It's an expensive gag. So didn't want to have to do this, but Daily Wire outed themselves very, very quickly.
Yes, the big gotcha there is that he said wage slave. Oh my God, what a terrible person. He said wage slave in a private conversation. Now, again, all these videos are going to be linked in the description box down below if you want to watch them in their entirety, full context, everything. So Steven Crowder goes on to say in this interview that really he's doing this for the future, for future generations, like the kid, the up-and-coming content creator. He's trying to help them because he cares so much about the movement.
What would it take for you to be willing to walk away from at least $50 million because of it causing harm to someone else that doesn't even affect you? But the next kid. I've talked about this, you have it in comedy. I'm never going to be the guy who pulls the ladder up after me. What motivates me is not money. Of course, everyone here likes nice things. They want to make a living. You've heard me say this many times. I want to pass the torch. I want there to be someone else to do this. It can't happen if this is how our movement is structured. And you know that, by the way, this could do irreparable damage to the movement, the country, and the people who fought so hard for the ground gained if we've decided to get in bed with these people who want to strip it away. I'm asking, would you walk away? What would it take for you to walk away from $50 million? Because it's true. That's exactly what I did. It's exactly what I'm doing. And so long as these contracts out there include enforcement of big tech, of punishing conservative creators on behalf of the people we claim to fight and the people who have long since demonetized us and can't stand me, and part of me doesn't blame them. As long as these contracts include that, not even for me, but the next person, I wouldn't take $1 billion. And certainly not if you understand in context, when behind closed doors, I know, and these people know, and acknowledge exactly what's being done to the next generation of creators.
Now, before we continue, I just have to state something real quick. I really don't have a dog in this fight. When it comes to my bias, listen, I'm blocked by certain people at the Daily Wire. I've criticized people at the Daily Wire like Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro. I've criticized Steven Crowder as well. I don't think I'm necessarily biased in one way or the other. I'm trying to view the situation for what it is and my experience in this general sector. When it comes to the side that most people are taking, I mean, Steven Crowder is the odds-on favorite. I mean, he's got the giant subscriber list, 6 million people, nearly 6 million subscribers. He's also got the populist rhetoric around him saying, hey, listen, I'm getting screwed over by these contracts. You got this big, giant, corporation, 200 plus employees, over 200 plus $1 million in revenue. I mean, it's this giant corporation. Stop Big Con. He's got the populist rhetoric around him saying he's the little guy, the independent YouTube creator fighting the big corporate, evilness that's siding with big tech. Of course, people, upon initially hearing that, before they hear all the facts, are going to take Crowder's side. Popularity contest and the populist rhetoric. I mean, how could he not be the odds-on favorite? But knowing what I know about this sphere, having been in it for a while, knowing a lot of players in the game, I have to call BS where I see it. Now, let me first say in Steven Crowder's favor, I think he made some legitimate points, for example, when it came to the term sheet. I think, for example, $50 million is too low. Now, granted, this is an initial term sheet offer. You're supposed to negotiate this up. He probably could have gotten it up to like $80 million or whatever. They talked about this. But apparently they asked for about $120 million. That was too much for the Daily Wire, and things went nowhere. I think it's also fair to say that the standard contract should maybe have some upside in there for the content creator, because as far as his contract went, or his term sheet went, and again, these are things that can be negotiated, but basically the most you could make is the $50 million in the 4 years that was allotted to you. And then from then on, it's just all penalty, penalty, penalty if you don't meet certain goals, or if certain things happen against you. Maybe have some upside in there for the content creator. If they hit a certain milestone, if you gain 100,000 plus subscribers for the network, you get to share in 15% of the profits for the next share of people that you bring in, or something like that. Or maybe there's a bonus involved. Have some upside in there for the content creator, so it's not like they're just getting completely screwed if they're extremely successful for the company. But as far as this rhetoric of, oh, well, I don't pull up the ladder, this is not about me, this is about you, it's about the next generation of content creators, it's about stopping big tech, etc. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy it. Here's what I can say. I know people who've been on Tucker Carlson, Tim Pool's show, The Blaze, and even Daily Wire. Multiple instances of this in the last 2 years, 2.5 years, etc. In the last 2.5 years, I really can't think of anyone that I know that's been on Steven Crowder. Maybe there's been some instances I just haven't been paying attention or something like that. But generally speaking, that doesn't really happen. That's not a common occurrence. I feel like it might have been many years ago, but these days, not so much. And like Candace Owens said, his reputation at the Blaze, not so good with the people that work there. I mean, the guy, I knew people who worked there who've never even seen the guy. And if you're a longtime viewer of Steven Crowder's, you probably remember a very well-known character in Steven Crowder's show, this guy who went by the name Not Gay Jared. Whatever happened to that guy? Well, he's still around as Jared Monroe on Twitter. Funny enough, the same day Steven Crowder put out the video showing that he had secretly recorded Jeremy Boring, Jared Monroe, his former employee, tweeted out this. Clearly a GIF showing that he's having a hard time keeping his mouth shut, but because of the NDA, of course, he can't say anything. But he doesn't talk much about Steven Crowder or his time at the show or anything like that. And it's presumably because he's under an NDA. Now, Crowder's talking about unfair contracts. It's not about the money. It's about the movement. It's not about the business. It's about the movement. It's about we need these fair contracts, do right by people, don't screw them over, this populist rhetoric. But in his own contracts, it seems he puts this very unfair language in there. If it's truly not about the money and it's all about the movement, etc., and you feel like you've done right by all your employees, fair contracts and all, well, have them be able to come out and that you won't prosecute them if they come out. And again, you can go through, I'm not going to play the clip here right now, but if you want to go watch his appearance on Timcast, they asked him about Jared, Not Gay Jared, Jared Monroe, and Crowder tried to dance around it. And I do wish the hosts would have pushed him a little bit more on this topic, because he basically said, oh, well, we actually had a send-off party for him. Like we did this and that, but he didn't really say, yeah, maybe it wasn't on the best of terms. Yeah, we do have an NDA where he can't speak his mind. Oh yeah, we will prosecute or we won't prosecute if he decides to violate that NDA, and potential non-compete clause, which he may also have in there. It would be nice. How about you show us what kind of contracts your employees have at your business? Show the viewers, show the people that want to support you that you have fair contracts at your place of business so that you're not all talk. Now, in this video, responding to his $50 million plus contract, It's Time to Stop, Steven Crowder talks about slave contracts. He doesn't want people being locked into these slave contracts, much like the term sheet he was offered.
If there are enough of you out there, I will transition Mug Club into a full-scale network with independent content creators who don't want to be locked into slave contracts. Look, I understand that business relationships sometimes fall through. People don't see eye to eye. I get that. But there is a way to structure these contracts and a network. There's a world in which contracts and a network exists where everyone benefits with some semblance of fairness, transparency. There's no need to be enslaved like this.
Now, this is funny talking about slave contracts and being enslaved by a network, given that Steven Crowder himself did a video mocking Colin Kaepernick for comparing slavery to $1 million contracts, as you can see from the title of this video of his.
What's your name, boy? What's your signing bonus? We're about to offer you 10 million. 15 million. Damn it, fullback. Just go down to 12. You're starting too high on the deal. All right. 13 million. No, boy. Be a good fullback and take your 10 million signing bonus.
And here's another thing. Tucker Carlson, for example, when he does a story and he cites a story in his show, he usually gives people the credit. He'll give them a shout out on the show, or there'll at least be like a little thing in there saying, hey, this person is the one who captured this video. This is their story. They'll highlight it. They'll often bring them on the show.
This was the scene, for example, in Dallas this weekend. Watch.
So there you could see on the top left there, it said the source of the video, which was Elijah Schaffer. So Tucker Carlson's show, his producers, they give credit to the person that took the video. But when Steven Crowder covers this, and even though these are directly from Elijah's Twitter account, no credit is given.
It's exactly what they look like. Let's go to the first example. I don't know. I'm going by these blind here. There you go. This one says, I am a 6 out of 10 and keep abortion safe.
So in this case, you had images from Elijah Schaffer's Twitter account that were shown by Steven Crowder, presumably when he was working at the Blaze, the same time Elijah was working at the Blaze. They were basically colleagues, and still no shout out. No credit was given. I even found the episode on his website. It's the show notes section where it lists all the sources, and I could not find a reference to the source being Elijah's Twitter account where he posted all this stuff. Another thing that I think matters when you bill yourself as a conservative commentator, comedian, whatever, but you have a big audience, you talk about these rhino Republicans, you bash them, and you cover the elections, on a regular basis. I mean, Crowder's election streams are very well known. He covers politics. He's really into this stuff. So I pulled up his voter records, and here's what I found. So here we can see that he is active/registered in the state of Texas as of April 9th, 2017. His calculated party is weak Republican. And here's the data for Stephen's voting record in the state of Texas. Now, strangely enough, there is a 2012 record here, which is interesting. I did not know that he voted in Texas in 2012. I was under the impression that he was in Michigan. That's interesting. Who knows what the story is there? But I guess he must have re-registered sometime in 2017, according to this info. And he voted in the general election in 2020, but no primaries. And no information on him voting in the general in 2022. Also 2018 for that matter, where he didn't vote in the general or primary election. So not a lot of voting history here in the state of Texas, where he's been a resident for quite a while. Now, the lack of primary participation, especially for someone so involved in politics, covering it all the time, who's supposed to be this staunch conservative who covers the elections on a regular basis. I mean, this guy knows when election night is. And it's not like he can't vote early. In 2020, he voted early in the general election, according to the data. But no votes in primaries, which if you're concerned about rhinos in your party, you're concerned about soft Republicans or whatever, and you want to push the party in a better direction and you want to get rid of the squishes, then participating in the primary is where you're going to have the most outsized effect when it comes to the outcome of an election. Now, if you want to see an example of a great voting record, I want to highlight my buddy here, Tony from Current Revolt. He's the one who helped me out with a lot of this stuff. Here you can see primaries, runoffs, general elections, 2016 through 2022. I mean, now that's a great record. And once again, shout out to Tony from Current Revolt. He helped me out with the sourcing of this information. In fact, we looked into his voting record in Michigan as well, and we couldn't find any records. There was no record of him whatsoever. Now, it's very possible that for OPSEC reasons or something, he was able to seal those records, pull it down, whatever, but we found no record whatsoever of any registration. Again, I'm sure it's possible he could have pulled it down or something, but we have no voting record there. All we can operate on is the info that we have for the state of Texas, which does not appear to be sealed or pulled down because it is active and we are seeing the information of past voting history. And I think this is important. I think if you really do care about the movement, if you care about making a change, etc., you should at least be voting in primaries. You should be voting in the elections. Ultimately, I don't think it's cool what Steven Crowder did, recording the phone conversation under these false pretenses with someone who he was, portraying himself to as a friend. They've apparently had a friendship for a very long time, getting worked up over a term sheet where you really didn't negotiate at all. But at the same time, I do think the Daily Wire could reform some of their standard contract practices. Again, have the contract maybe include some milestones where you can include some upside for the content creator so that they're not just limited to this ceiling. And it's not just all potential downside with all the penalties and everything like that. There should at least be some performance bonuses included in the standard contract. And again, if Crowder's serious about this not being about the money or the business, it's about the movement and fair contracts and this and that and not pulling up the ladder, hopefully he releases Not Gay Jared from his contract, the NDA, potential non-compete if that's in there, and allow him to speak freely about his time working at Louder with Crowder. Hopefully he'll give credit where credit is due. Hopefully he'll be bringing on more young and up-and-coming talent on his show, like many of the other programs we've mentioned during this video have. And again, sorry for my absence. I'll try to explain some of the reasons around that in the next video. But until then, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Social media links are in the description box below, as well as merch. Support us at nuancebro.com/join, and I'll see you next time, bro.